It's weird. Hey all, so I'm here today doing another interview, this time with my uncle, Jerry Rosenkranz. He wrote this book, which I've read a couple of times and had many questions.
You're the only one who did.
Hey Jerry, how are you doing?
Good,
Good.
good.
All
We
right,
had, we had dinner with Rob and Wendy last night.
great,
Everyone seems to be okay. I
good.
have a great letter that Sadie sent to me a number of years ago, but you go ahead with your questions.
All right, then you can add. So I,
Yeah.
I just want to add, so Jerry was born in 1935, and
Yes.
he's doing great. So here we go. Let's get right into it.
Yes.
So here's the first question. On page 74 of the book, you had said, the goal is still a fairer and more just society. Um, you indicate that only a minor percentage of our population is afforded the opportunity to succeed.
1 minute, Michael.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. Yeah. I think my earphones are on the shelf. Okay, I didn't put in my earphones
Okay.
or my earpieces,
Yeah.
and I want to be sure I hear. But go, Sheila's getting them. But in the meantime, you mentioned a page in a fair and just society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you had said the goal is still a fairer and more just society. And you indicated that only a small percentage of our population is afforded the opportunity to succeed. So my
Uh-huh.
questions are these. How do we get to a place where we have a fairer and more just society? And if you became president, what would you change?
Well, in terms of your first question, the answer is we can never get to a fair and just society. We can only get to a better society than exists. Um, we don't have to go into the one percenters. And even, there was an article in yesterday's Times where they were kidding around about the one percenters and, they do this and they do that in terms of uh, not doing anything with their plastic bottle and all of that. But the reality is they also at the same time back legislation that is essentially favorable to the wealthy and not to the vast majority. Your second question was,
If you were
if I
given,
were president,
yeah, what would you
what would I
change?
do?
How do we get to a better society?
There's so many things that I would change because I think that, for instance, Trump is repealing literally every reform that we've had. So one thing I would try and do is reverse all of those negatives that he installed and try and put them into uh, an everyday society where many more people would be, if you will, in a better shape.
What else? What else would you do? I mean, how you've lived for 85 years. I mean,
Yes.
what are some of the things that you would, change?
Well, there is a movement about blacks, so I probably would back reparations in that regard. Um, you know, Jeff Bezos is worth more than $200 billion. If Jeff were to give every one of his employees, the vast majority of whom are low income, $100,000, he wouldn't, do more than knock off $1 billion, $2 billion. Well, our country could do the same thing. you know, the fact that they just changed in the last year the minimum wage to 15. Well, prices may go up, but you can live better at 15 than 7.5 or 8, you know? And if you do get 15, you're probably going to spend it, which will help the economy anyway, and provide for your children and provide something decent for your children. You know, and I can keep going, but you know what I'm talking about and the gist of it.
Yeah, I get the
Okay.
idea. Okay. Let's move. So I've gone kind of, by page kind of thing, but so we're going to move a little bit and talk about your dad, Louis. So
Yeah.
you mentioned when you were 10 that you were at a talk where Louis was being honored.
Yes.
And there were some disparaging remarks made about him. And
Yes.
you were conflicted with Louis, not fostering
Yeah.
Miriam's memory, and therefore you didn't say anything to the men making the remarks. So,
First of all, I was 10 and they were old.
yeah,
I don't know that they would have received it well.
but thinking back on this,
Yes.
what do you feel that Louis should have done to foster Miriam's memory? And how would that have helped you? And did it have to do with your loss of Miriam's memory and you're wanting Louis to help you keep her alive?
Who, Miriam, you mean?
Keeping her memory alive, yes.
Oh, her memory alive.
For you, yeah.
Yeah, of course. I think that he made a bargain, as I said in the book, and the bargain basically was that they would not talk about Miriam. And they didn't talk about Bella's husband either, but that's not my concern. My concern was that he should have kept her alive for me. It was my mother. Bella was not my mother. And she could have been great instead of not, but she still would have been my mother. And my mother deserved to be remembered. And he didn't do that. And I think that affected Norman and I, my brother, older, probably less Alan because he was such a small boy. He had no memory. And he had no memory to bolster.
So what, I mean, obviously there are many things that Louis could have done to talk with you and my dad on the side, but he didn't do that.
No.
What would you have liked him to do? Give me some examples. What could he have done to help keep her memory alive for you and my dad?
Well, he could have talked about her habits. She was a great reader. I was a great reader. That would have made me feel comfortable. And he could have talked about her coming over. She was brave. She came herself, although she was helped by my aunt. Specifics isn't the point. I think the point was he didn't talk about her. Right. And he could have talked. I mean, he was married to her for whatever it was, 26, 16 years, 15 years, whatever. There was plenty to talk about. He could have just said, gee, that reminds me that Miriam did this or that or whatever. Instead, that wasn't on the agenda for him. And I think your father had to, suffer from the lack of that communication. Although your father was older, and therefore had much more memory. But when I asked him about different incidents, he couldn't bite them back, which was a great disappointment. Do
you have any kind of insight into whether Louis struggled with that at all? Anything that you remember?
I think, I think he made this bargain, and the bargain was that he just would, but he did, when I went to graduate school, he sent me some money. And I really didn't need it, but I accepted it, not because, I would have more money, but because it would make him feel better that he could buy me, with the money. But
Yeah.
I didn't need the money. I was working on 3 jobs, and this was just an added extra.
Yeah.
In fact, I should mention, excuse me, that one of the jobs I was working on was in the computer center. And in those days, it was brand new, the computer. And it really helped me all through my working life because of this experience with the computers at Syracuse. So that was fortunate.
So how old would you have been? Would that have been when you were 21 or so? 20?
Yeah. You mean the computers?
Well, when you worked in the computer room at Syracuse.
Oh, yeah. I was there for graduate school, and I must have been 21,
So late 50s.
22, whatever.
Okay.
What?
So
Yeah.
late 50s it would have been then.
Well, I was born in 35, so it was probably 56, 57.
Yeah.
And the computers were very, very raw. They were just starting to, they weren't really going out to the general population. That didn't happen really till the 60s. They were big, they were bulky, they were slow, but they were faster than anything we
Right.
had.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's some more questions for you. So on page 88, you're talking about the vanguards, and I get this image of the Happy Days TV show, of course.
In retrospect, it really was. We moved there in 45 because it was obvious that there wasn't enough room in the apartment for all of us. And for until 52, when I started at Baruch, which at that time was City College Business School, we were 7, 10 guys, a few gals, and it was Happy Days. Very much like that. All the fathers and mothers were almost all were first generation. They were very patriotic. America could do no wrong. Roosevelt could do no wrong. So it was like Happy Days. We were all in private houses. Maybe 6 blocks away they built some, large apartment houses, and blacks were put into them. And it was an attempt to deal with, school and all of that. But I don't know if it succeeded. It probably needed a lot more than that, but it was better than where they had come from.
So you talked about, I want to hear a little bit more about the vanguards, and
Yeah.
you talked about you did a drive cross country, but like what kinds of activities did you do with the vanguards, and did you maintain long-term friendships with any of the
Well, first of all, and most that we did was sports. We played baseball, but mostly we played basketball every day on the weekends. And some of the players were quite good. Some of them were not so good. a friend of mine who's passed away, named Fred Cuba, I gave the eulogy for him, was a terrific shooter. And he was on another team though, and we played, and I just warned my team to watch him. What else did we do? There were social club, there were social activities. We went to movies, all of the things that young kids did. I don't think any of us worked. I'm not sure your father worked. But, the incomes were basically the same. And we probably lived within 3 to 5 blocks, so we were close. And there were a few girls who lived near us. One of them, the father didn't have any sons. They had 2 gals, 2 daughters. So he took me to a Yankee game and to eat out. And the only things we ever ate out was Chinese food or delicatessens. So we had steak. And he was the exception to the rest of the parents. He had money. He had a business up in Westchester, north of the city. And he had a very successful business. And I think his name was Winchester. And right off the bat, he probably changed his name because everyone else was, was more. But what did we do? I may have said it in the book. A guy across the street named Ben Forsythe. From the time I met him, and he was young and I was young, he wanted to be a doctor. And he became a doctor. And that's very unusual that at a young age, you know what you want to do. And so Ben became a doctor. Herb, his father died early. And so this was in our first year of college. He left school and took over his father's sash business, window sash. And he was bright, but he had to support his mother and sisters. I'm not sure, probably a mother and sister.
Yeah.
And then, one guy went to NYU. They had money because in those days, to go to NYU was a paying school, whereas City and ultimately Baruch, you didn't pay. The tuition was $8, I think, a semester or a year, so it's a joke. But then there were others. One guy became a policeman, Mickey Leff. I haven't heard these names in a long time. And so he didn't go to college. He joined the police force. And another guy didn't go to college. He went to work. So it was varied and mixed. Pat went to community college. Linda, Pat's wife, was very bright. She lived like 5 blocks away. And so it was varied. And I, because of money, above all, went to Baruch.
And were most of the guys and girls, were they Jewish or was it a mixture?
No, they were all Jewish.
They were all Jewish.
However, there were, maybe 2 hours, two buildings past us, the Italian area started.
Uh-huh.
And we used to play basketball with them. Some were good, some were not. And most of them, I'm trying to think, they were a mixed bag, not unlike us. Some of them went to college, some of them didn't.
Yeah. But
Some of them,
this wasn't like a West Side Story thing, right? I mean, where there were gangs and blah, blah,
oh,
blah.
there were
Where?
gangs, yeah. And in fact, there was one fight where this guy fought against my friend, and to my lasting regret, I didn't jump in. But there were 4 of them and 3 or 4, and I helped them home. And it was over a basketball shot, for Christ's sakes. So there were gangs, but there weren't tons of gangs. As far as I know, if there was mafia, there was not much. I mean, we didn't know from the mafia. The area was safe. You know, it was within, on Sunday, Louis would drive down to this bakery and pick up rolls and challah and cakes. It was maybe a 15-minute walk, but you know, a 5-minute, what do you call it, car ride. There were gangs, and one incident was the vanguards, how we would call it, bought jackets, and we wore them to school. And one of the gang members said, if you guys wear those jackets, we'll rip them off and beat the hell out of you. So I had a dilemma, you know. I waited about 4 or 5 days, and then I wore it.
And nothing happened.
Nothing happened.
Okay.
But the threat was real, or it felt real. We lived in, what do you call it, where the houses are connected. And I think there were 10 or 12 houses.
Row houses.
Yeah. And where people live, where we live. And you could drive in at this end and go into the back and then come out this end. And so in the back, we had a cherry tree and a small garden, and then Louis would park the car. And Bella, we would pick the cherries off the tree, and Bella would make cherry, I don't know, what did she make? She canned them. Okay. And so it was very rare, because in the winter we actually had cherries. It was very unusual. And I should say that the fathers of all of these guys and gals, one was a customs agent. Yeah. So he made more money than everyone, I think. But my father had the shop. He would drive in every day. And other fathers, one guy worked for the post office. You know, things like that. Literally all of the women stayed home. None of them worked. So Louis and all the rest of these guys basically made enough, you know, to support a family. And that was good, you know, to have a mother home. It would have been better with Miriam. But, and she would cook every day and clean, you know, so that's what stay-at-homes do.
That's right.
Is to clean and cook. And she was a great puzzle doer. and she played a lot of canasta. Louis just played poker, but he didn't do much.
Yeah.
He wasn't into cards. He wasn't into sports, but we were. And then, of course, you know the story of Norman was a terrifically fast runner. And Bella and, excuse me a second, yeah, Bella and Louis said, and he went to Clinton and high school, and he made the team, and he might have done well. But they said, what Jewish boy goes to this school and runs? And they just stopped him from doing it, which was a shame. And Alan, was a year old, and he never knew his mother, and so he grew up and went to kindergarten, etc., etc.
Yeah.
We're not far from a public school, and maybe 5 blocks where we went, and the high school was maybe 8 blocks. So we walked, and in the first year, we actually walked home and had some sandwiches and then went back. But, as you got older, you didn't want to go home. And for my year, I was voted either the smartest kid or this or that, something like that.
Huh.
Somewhere right now I'm cleaning the house. And so I cleaned away a lot of pictures. I found our marriage certificate, Louis and Miriam's citizenship paper.
Oh, wow.
And things like that. So,
Wow.
Yeah, but I haven't finished, and I have a feeling I'm going to, discover more stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So here's another question I have for you.
Yeah, sure. So,
this is kind of a big question, Jerry.
okay.
So on page 91 of the book, you said that you wanted to be a mensch early on.
Right.
So you're now, as I've said, you're 85. But when you reflect on this term, that is mensch, that you used early on, have you been a mensch? Have you mostly lived your life with the Boy Scout creed, honest, honorable, friendly, patriotic?
My wife is hovering occasionally.
And contributing to society as well. What would you say?
It's a tough question. I think that I wanted to be a good person.
Yeah.
And that's what a mensch meant to me, which meant helping others and contributing personally and financially. But basically, politically, in our building, exactly, in certain different venues and all. But it meant something to me to be a good person. Was it connected to my mother or my father? I don't think so. I think it was me feeling I wanted to be a good person, and that there was an obligation, if you will, to society. That society, for instance, gave me the college. At $8 a semester or a year, it's a joke. Society gave me that. What could I do in return? And certainly we contribute a lot of money to charity every year. When I was in Chappaqua, so this is already past, starting my business and past you know, our years, marriage, children. Um, I joined the library, and I was well known there. So they asked me if I wanted to be on the library board. And so I was on the library board, and I helped to build a new library. I don't mean physically, but as part of the library board. And I served on other boards. And I mean, those aren't great. The library was important to me because I felt something about libraries. But let's see, I served on a number of boards in Chappaqua. And I started, when we got to New York, we had a problem with the city, meaning the building, not myself. And the problem was they wanted to put a big water tunnel on our block. And we collectively, most of the residents thought the tunnel was supposed to go on 62nd Street, where there were very few people living. And on our block, there were a lot of people living. And we weren't prepared for that as a building. So I started an organization called the Neighborhood Council, neighborhood something, I don't know the name, and recruited a number of people, and we policed the area. You know, there were male prostitutes in our area, and we got the police to get them out. But it was much more than that. We were a group that I founded, and we represented 11 buildings, and probably that could be 5,000 to 7,000 people. And we petitioned against our representatives. We became friendly with every one of them. They would call us. We had them come and address us. So yes, I served on our board and still am, but this neighborhood coalition was mine. So that was a little bit of giving back, fighting against, there were 22 bars in the area. We're down to 11 now, because every time they apply for a license, we attend, protest, or we say limited hours and things like that. And I think I did some other things, but frankly, none come to mind.
But where did that come from? I mean, why, you know, on page 91, it's in bold. I wanted to be a mensch.
Yeah. You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just think that at some point early, I felt I had an obligation to help society. Yeah. That's all. I didn't run for office or anything like that. But this coalition, as an example, and there are probably a number of others, was a way of paying back the neighborhood, which was very nice, and making it better, you know, and all. And I can't answer more than that for the moment. Maybe other things will come to mind.
Yeah.
I don't know why I wanted to be a mensch, except it was the right thing.
So here's a follow-up to that. So you and Joe, who, you know, we'll talk more about during the interviews, you started an award at Baruch College in honor of David Valinsky, who was one of your. So is that part of being a mensch and wanting to help others, do you think?
Well, first of all, you have to know what David Valinsky was. He was one of my professors at Baruch. He was the president of the Senate, which is all of the professors in the city college, in the city, which was a ton of professors. I mean, if you think of all those major colleges and community colleges, yeah, who knows? It could be 1,000 professors at least, and maybe more. I've lost a thought. Why did I took these classes with him, and he introduced me to market research.
Yeah.
And then he became our consultant, and he taught me a lot. And I enjoyed him. And I think that I felt I wanted to award him for he taught at Peru. So I wanted to award him for his service at Peru. He told me that, the movie, The Young Lions is about World War II, and one of the guys is Jewish, and there's a certain amount of prejudice. So Dave told me about any number of prejudice that, he suffered while in the Army. But I did want to honor him. I thought that he was, and so did Joe. We wanted to honor that just what he did and what he taught us, and the fact that he worked for us then as a consultant, not as a project director. And he taught me a lot. So, and then we have a second scholarship where we, I think, praise data development rather than Jerry and Joe. And we were very proud of our company, and what we had accomplished, and what we went from 0 to a lot, and we felt very proud of that, what we had, created and built up. And when we left, how big it was and all of that. And some of the things we did, we were very early pioneers in a movement called Listen to the Consumers. And we were very much, we co-founded, along with some others, the Trade Association. And what was interesting was that we shouldn't have been in the room because we were a small company, but you had Gallup in the room, and you had a number of other very big firms. Nielsen was in the room when we started, and Joe and I, and we didn't belong because we didn't have the size and and the dollars and the experience. These were presidents of Gallup and Nielsen and several others that now have eluded me. They were guys who had, they might testify to Congress, and we were not in their class, in their, that level. But for some reason, two of them said they had heard of us and they wanted us to represent analytical research, but or just what we were doing. So we joined, they called the meeting. Joe was elected treasurer. I was recruited to be the president, and I didn't take the job. And that was one of the stupidest things I ever did. But Sheila, Joe, and my analyst said, why do you need the trouble? And that was, some things are stupid, and I was stupid. To be honored that way, to be the, for a year. Anyway,
I'm gonna have a lot more questions about your business and
Oh, sure.
about that incident because I do remember
Yeah.
that. Let me ask you one more for today, and then
Okay, what time is it?
it's
Oh, wow.
yeah. So here's a question. So during McCarthyism,
Yeah,
you were attending Baruch, and
right.
you were involved in the Young Democrats and Americans for Democratic Actions, where you
Yeah,
did serve as president.
yeah, of both.
Yeah. So here's the questions. Why did you choose to join in the midst of McCarthyism? What more do you remember about this period?
Yeah.
And were you ever frightened of anyone that you knew getting blacklisted?
Well, we were young, so I'm answering the last.
Yeah.
Um, One of the vanguards' parents were communists,
Uh,
and uh, and his cousin was a communist. Um, and you know, if you're together and it's a social situation, I read this book, I did this, I did that. I was a reader. Herb would never discuss politics. And I'm sure it was a function of his parents saying, don't talk, don't, you know. So he wasn't blacklisted. And as far as I know, his parents were. His parents had this business, as I mentioned earlier. Um, he was a very good basketball player. So I don't know. At that time in the Bronx, you had an area that was um, communist area and socialist area, and it was very real. And the rest of the Bronx was not, but that one area was very communist. And I maybe by the time we talk again, I'll remember what it was called. But uh, in terms of why did I join? Well, I joined because, you know, when Adlai Stevenson ran, I gave out pamphlets and letters, and, you know, and all of that. It's what I believed in. I mean, it was Democrats, and we were, you know, Roosevelt, Louis, and Bella, and then get down to us. I was a Democrat. I wanted to help society. I wanted to be, you know, things. It was college. There were two organizations. One was the Democratic Party, and the other was something for Democrats, more liberal than the first. And I just did. Was I scared? I think I was scared to the extent that they were, you know, if they were compiling lists, they may have been compiling lists of the Democrats, you know, and they were going to do something, and it felt frightening, you know, but, you know, in a realistic sense, I said to myself, they're not after me. You know, I'm too low on the totem pole, you know. The truth is, they have to go very far to get to my level, down deep. So I was okay. And
But do you remember like Louis and Bella, you know, discussing
yeah,
on and
they were social animals, both of them, which leads me to probably believe Miriam was also, because Louis loved it, but they didn't have any money when Miriam was alive, as opposed to later on, he did. And, excuse me, and every Sunday, friends of theirs would come over, Bella would play the piano, people would sing, and they would all talk about politics. But they weren't communists, they were Democrats. But they would talk, yeah, they would, friends would talk about I mean, if we're talking of from 45 to 52, probably after that I would be going out, but then I'd come back. Bella was a great cook, and she would cook, and people would bring dishes, but she would cook. And then when people left, she would do puzzles, and then go upstairs and do puzzles. I mean, she just loved doing that. And I'm just trying to think. As I think I've mentioned in the book, Louie was a reader of newspapers, but not of books. She was a reader of books. And I'm just trying to think. I mean, if you want to know about college, that could be for another time.
But what do you remember about that period, though? Is it similar to what's going on now at all? I mean, McCarthyism? Or?
See, I think then with McCarthy, he was the driving force. And, well, now I think it's worse. In fact, it's the worst I think I've experienced. And it will get worse if he gets reelected. There are so many people who are doing so many terrible things that he's brought into the government. It's frightening. And I don't, the only thing you can do is give some money and perhaps make some calls, but there are a number of states that are up in the air that are, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. I mean, those states were all Democratic. And now, they're teetering between Trump and Biden. I'd like to see Biden more active. And maybe they have a plan that they'll spend more and more money and more commercials and more talking. And I'm very concerned how he'll be with Trump when they do some sort of a debate. I saw him the other night, and he halted himself several times, and he would stop in mid-sentence. Trump is a very effective speaker, a la TV and all of that. But Biden will come across as sincere, and Trump won't. Yeah. And the other thing is, and I've sent this to our congresswoman, but I don't know if she'll do it. If he goes around, let's say there's a glass separator. If Trump goes around, I think that was one of the things that Clinton lost. I think I've told you this. One of the things Clinton lost was because he didn't react to that. And that was a situation where, are we going to be safe under him? Or is he not going to rise the occasion? And I told you what Biden should have is a stick. And if he comes around, he should bang it and threaten. No. And I think there's a possibility Trump could run off the stage, which would cement the election. But he probably wouldn't. But he might. And Biden would then say something like, this is my territory. I defend my wife, my children, and above all, my country. That would be enough. But I don't know that he'll do it.
That is great. I love that.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, you asked about Mensch and all of that. I was nominated and elected to the Honor Society at Baruch. The first year or two, my grades were not so good because I really kidded around. But from then on, I really got all A's and all of that, and I found something in market research. But one of the prerequisites is you had to do a certain amount of service in the school. So I don't even remember what it was, but I had to do it and I did it. So
That was it.
we're ended.
So we've gone through about half of page 1, so I still have 3 more pages.
Wow.
So we have lots of questions, and I thank you so much. It was very,
Okay.
very interesting.
Well, it's good for me to remember some of these things,
That's right.
you know, and all, and no harm, easy, but it's good to remember them. So,
Okay.
how is the census doing?